To the one and only George Jones are two of our finest ever. Ladies and gentlemen, Allan Jackson and George Strait.
At 73, George Strait has finally broken his silence, and what he just confirmed about Allan Jackson is leaving fans stunned. For decades, these two names have stood side by side, but behind the scenes, questions have always remained. So, what's the truth George Strait just revealed about Allan Jackson after all these years? Stick around as we break it all down. You won't want to miss this. Humble beginnings. Allan Jackson's story begins in the small town of Newnan, Georgia. He was born on October 17, 1958, to Joseph Eugene Daddy Gene Jackson and Ruth Music Mama Ruth Jackson. Allan was the youngest of 5 children. His family wasn't wealthy. In fact, they lived in a tiny house that had been built around his grandfather's old tool shed. The home was simple and small, but it was filled with love, music, and strong family values. Growing up in that modest space helped shape who Allan was as a person. It gave him a sense of humility and hard work, something that would later define his life and career. Allan's early years were deeply influenced by the music around him. His family loved gospel music. They often played it at home, and it quickly became part of his world. He also listened to hymns at church, where music was a regular part of their life. Gospel music was the first style that truly made an impact on him. The deep emotional voices and heartfelt lyrics stuck with him even as he grew older. As a teenager, Allan began singing at church events and small local gatherings. Sometimes he'd perform at community get-togethers or little festivals around Newnan. It wasn't anything fancy, but those small performances gave him confidence. They were the first steps towards something much bigger, even though he didn't know it yet. At the time, music was just something he loved, not something he thought could become his job. After finishing school, Allan didn't immediately head to Nashville or start a career in music. Life had other plans first. At 21 years old, he married his high school sweetheart, Denise Jackson. They had been dating since they were teenagers. Their relationship was strong, built on years of knowing each other and growing up together in the same small town. Denise would later play a key role in Allan's success, but in those early years they were just two young people trying to build a life. Allan worked regular jobs to help support himself and Denise. He took up a job in construction, which kept him busy during the day. He also worked in a car parts store at one point. These were hard-working blue-collar jobs. Music was always on his mind, but at that stage, it was more of a dream than a real career goal. At night, when the day's work was done, Allan would often write songs or practice his guitar. He was preparing himself in small ways for what might come later. The turning point in Allan Jackson's life came in a way that almost felt like fate. One day, Denise was working as a flight attendant when she happened to meet someone who worked for country star Glen Campbell. During their conversation, Denise told the person that her husband was a talented singer-songwriter. The person gave her the contact information for Glen Campbell's Nashville publishing company. It was a long shot, but Allan sent his demo tapes there. That moment changed everything. Glen Campbell's publishing company took interest in Allan's music and offered him a publishing deal. That first bit of recognition was what Allan needed to truly start his journey in the music business. With Denise's support and that one lucky meeting, Allan packed his dreams and headed for Nashville, ready to chase the life he'd only imagined before. It wasn't an easy road, but it was the start of something incredible. And soon, that quiet boy from Georgia would become one of the biggest names in country music. Nashville Dreams. When Allan Jackson moved to Nashville in the mid-1980s, he wasn't stepping into a world of luxury or instant fame. Nashville is the heart of country music, but for people trying to make it, it can also be a tough, exhausting place. Allan came to the city with dreams, a guitar, a handful of songs, and very little else. He and his wife, Denise, packed up their lives and left behind the comfort of their small Georgia hometown to take a chance on a future that was far from guaranteed. Life in Nashville during those first years wasn't easy. The Jacksons didn't have a lot of money. They lived simply, often struggling to pay the bills. Allan worked different jobs to keep them afloat. He worked in mailrooms, drove delivery trucks, and even worked in a printing shop at one point. These were long days with tiring hours. But no matter how busy or tired he was, Allan never gave up on his dream of becoming a country music singer. After work, He would focus on his music. He'd write songs, polish his guitar playing, and record demos. A demo is basically a rough recording of a song, usually made to give record labels an idea of what an artist sounds like. Allan started shopping those demos around Nashville. Nashville was full of singers and songwriters hoping for the same thing. It was competitive and frustrating. Rejection was common, but Allan was determined, and he had the support of Denise pushing him to keep going. Then came the big break that changed everything. Denise played a huge role in making it happen. One day at work, while on a flight, she met someone connected to Glen Campbell, one of the biggest stars in country music at the time. That person gave her a contact at Glen Campbell's publishing company in Nashville. Allan followed up and sent in his demo tapes. It was a long shot, but it worked. The people at Glen Campbell's publishing company liked what they heard. They helped him get his foot in the door. Allan's real breakthrough came when he signed with Arista Nashville in 1989. This was a big deal, not just for Allan but for Arista as well. He was their very first country artist. Arista was starting a new country division and they saw potential in Allan's style. They liked that he wasn't trying to be flashy or trendy. He sounded like real country, the kind that made people sit up and listen because it felt honest and true. In 1990, Allan released his first full album, Here in the Real World. This was the moment everything started to change for him. The album included several songs that quickly caught the attention of country music fans. The title track, Here in the Real World, was especially important. It was a slow, heartfelt song about how life doesn't always work out the way we hope. The song connected with people because it was relatable. It wasn't about parties or money. It was about real life, with its ups and downs. The success of Here in the Real World was just the beginning. In 1991, Allan released his second album, Don't Rock the Jukebox, and that's when things really took off. The title track, Don't Rock the Jukebox, became one of his signature songs. It had a catchy, toe-tapping rhythm and playful lyrics. It didn't take long for the music industry to notice. Allan quickly started racking up #1 hits. Songs like I'd Love You All Over Again Someday and Midnight in Montgomery helped cement his place in the world of country music. Awards and nominations started to follow. More importantly, fans connected with Allan's music because they could tell he was singing from experience, not just reading lyrics off a page. His songwriting came from real life, with stories about family, love, struggles, and small-town life. By the early 90s, Allan Jackson wasn't just another new artist. He was a rising star. He had proven that a simple guy from Georgia could come to Nashville, stick to his roots, and make a name for himself without changing who he was. And soon, Allan would prove that his success was just getting started, because the 90s were about to turn him into a true country legend. The Allan Jackson Sounds. By the early 1990s, Allan Jackson had already made a strong name for himself in country music, but it was during this decade that he truly became one of the biggest stars in the genre. What made Allan stand out from the crowd was how consistent he was. Album after album, hit after hit, he kept delivering songs that fans loved. He didn't change his style to fit trends. He kept his music honest, fun, and full of heart. One of the biggest moments of Allan's career came with the release of his third album, A Lot About Livin', in 1992. This album turned Allan from a rising star into a household name. It was packed with hit songs, but none were bigger than Chattahoochee. That song became one of the defining songs of his career. Allan began winning big awards, including multiple wins at the Country Music Association Awards and Academy of Country Music Awards. He also started receiving nominations for Grammy Awards, which is one of the highest honors in the entire music industry. Allan's simple country style was now reaching a national audience in a major way. But Allan didn't slow down. He kept releasing albums that connected with people. In 1994, he released Who I Am, another collection of songs that mixed fun country sounds with emotional ballads. One of the standout tracks was Livin' on Love, a sweet song about a couple making life work with little money but plenty of love. It was another example of how Allan could take simple life experiences and turn them into meaningful music that felt real to people. One of the biggest reasons for Allan's success was that he wrote or co-wrote most of his own songs. This gave his music a deep sense of honesty. Fans could tell he wasn't just singing someone else's words, he was telling his own stories. This personal touch made his songs hit harder emotionally. Whether he was singing about falling in love, struggling through hard times, or just having fun on a summer day, it always felt real because it was real. That kind of honesty kept fans loyal to him through the years. Alan Jackson never had to chase fame or change who he was to stay successful. His music spoke for itself, and the 1990s showed just how powerful that music could be. Marriage and infidelity. Behind the success of Alan Jackson's music was a personal story that was just as meaningful, filled with both love and struggle. Much of that story centers around his marriage to his wife, Denise Jackson. Their relationship has been through both beautiful moments and very public hardships. It's a story of young love, family, mistakes, forgiveness, and faith. Alan and Denise's love story started long before Alan became a country music star. They met when they were both teenagers growing up in Noonan, Georgia. Denise was a cheerleader, and Alan was the tall, quiet guy who caught her eye. Their relationship grew during those early years, built on shared values and simple beginnings. They started dating seriously in high school and eventually got married in 1979 when Alan was just 21 years old. From the very beginning, Denise was one of Alan's biggest supporters. She believed in his talent long before the rest of the world knew his name. During their early years of marriage, they faced the same challenges that most young couples go through: paying the bills, working hard, jobs, and figuring out life together. But what made their relationship special was that they were chasing a dream together. When Alan decided to pursue a career in music, it was Denise who pushed him to take that leap of faith. She stood by him when they moved to Nashville. Money was tight, and success didn't come right away. Alan worked odd jobs while trying to get his music noticed, and Denise worked as a flight attendant to help support them financially. It was during one of her flights that she met the person connected to Glenn Campbell, a meeting that eventually opened the first real door for Alan's career. Without Denise's belief in him and that lucky conversation, Alan's career may have taken much longer to get started, or may never have started at all. As Alan's career grew, so did their family. The Jacksons had 3 daughters together: Maddie, Alexandra, often called Allie, and Danny. Alan often talked about how much he loved being a father. Family life was important to him, even as his schedule became filled with touring, recording, and public appearances. The image of Alan Jackson as a devoted family man was one that many fans admired. His songs often reflected his love for family life, whether it was about relationships, growing up, or looking back on the past with fondness. But even with their love and family life, things were not always perfect. In the late 1990s, the Jacksons faced one of the hardest periods of their marriage. In 1997, it became public that Alan had been unfaithful to Denise. The news came as a shock to many fans who had seen the Jacksons as the ideal family. The pressures of fame, long tours, and the music business played a role in Alan's mistakes, but none of that made it easier for Denise or their family. The infidelity led to a temporary separation between Alan and Denise. During this painful time, Denise leaned heavily on her Christian faith for strength. She later wrote about this period in her book, It's All About Him, where she shared her side of the story with honesty and grace. The book wasn't just about their marriage. It was also about Denise's personal journey of forgiveness, faith, and healing. It quickly became a bestseller, especially in Christian circles, because it dealt with real-life struggles in a way that people could understand. Fortunately, this story didn't end in divorce. After spending time apart, Alan and Denise worked through their problems. They reconciled and came back together as a family, stronger and more open than before. Their reconciliation was widely covered in both Christian media and country music news outlets. It was seen as a story of redemption, a reminder that even people who seem to have it all still face real challenges behind the scenes. Alan didn't shy away from admitting his mistakes. He spoke openly about his regrets, and many of those feelings were later woven into his music. One of the clearest examples of this is the song Remember When, where Alan reflects on their entire journey: falling in love, starting their family, facing hard times, and choosing to stay together. The song became one of his most emotional and loved tracks, not just because of the melody, but because people knew the story behind it was true. After their reconciliation, both Alan and Denise placed a much stronger focus on their faith and family life. They worked hard to heal the wounds that had been opened during that difficult time. Denise's writing career took off after her book's success, and she became known as not just Allan Jackson's wife, but as a respected author and speaker in her own right. Their openness about their struggles made their story relatable to fans everywhere, especially couples going through their own tough times. For many of Allan's fans, his music became even more meaningful after learning about his personal struggles. Knowing that the man singing those songs had walked through both the good and bad of life made the words feel more real. Allan's commitment to his marriage and family, even after his mistakes, showed the same honesty that made his songwriting so powerful. Even with the ups and downs of their personal life, Allan and Denise stayed together and focused on what mattered most to them: faith, forgiveness, and family. Their story became more than just a love story. It became a story of growth, second chances, and learning from mistakes. Industry defiance moments. One of the things that made Allan Jackson different from a lot of other stars was that he didn't like playing by the usual rules of the music business. While many artists worked hard to fit in with trends or impress the big names in Nashville, Allan always chose to stand his ground. He didn't like industry politics, and he didn't care about chasing fame just for the sake of it. What mattered to him was making real, honest country music that spoke to people. One of the biggest examples of this was his song, "Where Were You?" Allan wrote this song after the tragic events of September 11, 2001. Like most Americans, he was heartbroken and searching for a way to express what he was feeling. But instead of rushing into the studio to make a hit, Allan sat with his emotions first. He wrote the song by himself at home, sitting quietly, letting the words come naturally. The song wasn't filled with anger or political messages. Instead, it was simple, emotional, and deeply personal. Allan debuted "Where Will You Live" at the 2001 CMA Awards. It was a risky move. No one had heard the song before. He stood there on stage, calmly delivering a message of sorrow, faith, and reflection. The performance stopped the entire room. People were silent, some in tears. The song didn't sound like a hit on the radio, but it touched people's hearts in a way that no flashy production ever could. Even though it wasn't written to be a commercial success, the song exploded in popularity. It became a #1 hit, won major awards, and is still remembered as one of the most important songs written in response to that national tragedy. That moment showed exactly who Allan Jackson was as an artist, someone who followed his heart, not the charts. But this wasn't the first time Allan had stood up to the music industry. 2 years earlier, at the 1999 CMA Awards, Allan had made another bold move. George Jones, one of Allan's musical heroes, had been asked to perform his song "Choices" at the show. But producers told George he could only perform a shortened version, which upset many traditional country fans. George refused to perform at all because of it. Allan didn't agree with how George was treated. During his own scheduled performance at the same show, Allan and his band were supposed to play his hit "Papa Top." They started playing that song, but then, in the middle of the performance, they stopped. Allan shifted into singing George Jones's "Choices" instead. It was a clear act of defiance against the show's producers. He used his moment on national TV to stand up for one of his heroes and for traditional country music. Fans loved it. Because of moments like these, Allan earned a reputation as a reluctant superstar. He didn't chase fame, play industry games, or jump on musical trends. He just focused on writing songs, singing from the heart, and standing up for what he believed was right, battling a disease. In 2021, Allan Jackson opened up to the world about something very personal: his health. After years of being a steady, reliable figure in country music, Allan revealed that he had been diagnosed with Charcot-Marie tooth disease, often called CMT for short. It's a rare, inherited nerve disorder that affects the muscles and nerves in the body, mainly in the legs and feet. The condition doesn't affect a person's thinking or voice, but it does make it harder to move around. Over time, it can cause balance problems, muscle weakness, and difficulty standing or walking normally. For years, Allan had been dealing with the effects of this disease quietly. Fans may have noticed him moving more carefully on stage or holding onto the microphone stand for balance. But until 2021, Allan kept the diagnosis private. When he finally chose to share the news, it wasn't for sympathy, it was for honesty. He wanted his fans to understand what he was going through and why his performances might look a little different than before. Even though CMT isn't life-threatening, it is life-changing. For an artist like Alan Jackson, whose career has always involved long tours and active stage shows, the disease forced him to slow down. Allan talked openly about how it affected his ability to perform. He didn't want to fake anything or pretend that everything was perfect when it wasn't. He explained that singing was still something he could do with a full heart, but standing and moving around the stage the way he used to was becoming more difficult. Instead of quitting, Allan adjusted. In 2022, he announced his last call, one more for the road tour. While it wasn't officially called a farewell tour, the feeling around it was emotional. Fans understood that this might be the last time they'd get to see him on a full tour. The shows were packed with fans who had followed Allan's career from the start, and many of the performances carried an extra emotional weight. Allan stood up there with full honesty, delivering the songs people loved, but without pretending he was the same man from 20 years ago. That honesty is part of why people love him. Through it all, Allan never stopped being open with his fans. He didn't hide his condition or try to stage performances that looked flawless. He stayed real, just like he always had. Allan's focus began shifting more toward what mattered most to him: his family, his health, and his love for writing songs. He's made it clear that while touring might slow down, he's not done making music. Writing songs has always been at the heart of his career, and he's still committed to doing that whenever he feels inspired. Allan and George Strait. Alan Jackson's career wasn't just about solo success. One of the most interesting parts of his journey was his friendship and collaboration with another country legend, George Strait. These two men weren't just friends, they were seen as partners in standing up for real country music during a time when the genre was changing fast. Allan and George had something very important in common. They both loved traditional country music. In the 1990s, country radio was starting to play more pop-influenced songs. Many new artists were mixing pop and rock sounds into their country songs, and some traditional fans were worried that the heart of country music was being lost. While some artists chased after pop success, Alan Jackson and George Strait held their ground. They both believed that country music didn't need to change just to fit popular trends. They wanted to keep it real, with songs about life, love, heartbreak, and small-town living. One of the most powerful moments in their shared story came at the 2000 Country Music Association Awards. That night, Allan and George performed a song together called "Murder on Music Row." The song wasn't just entertainment, it was a protest. "Murder on Music Row" was a sharp, direct statement about how traditional country music was being pushed aside by more commercial pop-style songs. The lyrics talked about how someone killed country music, and that the blame was with people in the music business who cared more about money than the soul of the music. The performance was bold. It was rare for artists to speak out like that on such a big stage, especially during an industry awards show. But Allan and George didn't hold back. They stood side by side and sang those words in front of the very people who were responsible for shaping the country music scene in Nashville. Fans loved it. Traditional country music supporters saw it as a brave stand against what they felt was the watering down of real country music. For many, it was a breath of fresh air to hear two major stars publicly standing up for the sound they loved. Country radio listeners and die-hard country fans praised the performance and embraced the song as their anthem for keeping country music alive. Of course, not everyone in the industry was happy about it. Some executives in Nashville saw the performance as disrespectful or unnecessary. The message called out the very people who worked behind the scenes to promote country artists and grow the business. But Allan and George didn't seem to care about the criticism. Their loyalty was to the music, not the business. That performance only strengthened the bond between Alan Jackson and George Strait. The two artists had always had respect for each other, but "Murder on Music Row" made them look like a united front in defending the roots of country music. Over the years, they continued to appear together at major events, sometimes performing, sometimes just presenting awards. They were often described as two of the last major champions of neo-traditional country, a style that blended modern production with classic country storytelling. In interviews, both men often spoke highly of each other. George admired Alan's songwriting and his calm, steady approach to fame. Allan admired George's smooth voice, career longevity, and commitment to pure country music. They didn't need gimmicks or trends. They just relied on good songs and honest performances. They also toured together at times, giving fans a chance to see two country giants on the same stage. Whenever they performed together, it was clear that their respect for each other was real. Fans loved it because they felt like they were watching two old friends play the music they both believed in with all their hearts. The partnership between Alan Jackson and George Strait wasn't just about a few songs or shows, it was about standing up for something bigger. They reminded fans and the industry that country music didn't need to change to be great. It was already great, just the way it was. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.